Hey, everybody. How's it going? Happy Wednesday. If you're here live, say hi. Let me know you're here so I can say hi back. And today we're talking about transitions. This is something that I haven't talked about in a while, but I'm finding lots and lots and lots of, oops. Hold on. My volume is turned on, so now I'm hearing myself. Hold on. There we go. Okay, there we go. Sorry. I was hearing myself in the background. That's always weird. Transitions is not something that I've talked about in really a while. But the end of the year is fast approaching. The conversations I'm having with my clients tend to be more around what we're wrapping up and what we're moving into next year. And I notice just with a lot of my client conversations lately that, and that's really where I get, by the way, most of these topics that I talk about on these lives is I will notice themes come up in across the board in my clients. And it's so interesting, I think, to see how themes arise and how people can be in different aspects of their business, focusing on different aspects of their business. They can be at different phases of business and yet dealing with some of the same things. And so much of what I talk about on these lives is inspired by my conversations with my clients, things that I see happening with a lot of people, and then things that I see happening in my own business as well. So as we talk about transition, I think it's just a good time of year to be talking about it. And it's also the kind of thing that I personally think we don't always give ourselves enough credit for when we are in a transition. And part of what I want to talk about today is a little bit of how you even know if you're in a transition, because sometimes we aren't aware or we aren't giving ourselves credit for the fact that we're in a transition, and that's actually really important. And knowing that you're in a transition when you're in a transition is actually really important. And so we'll be talking about that a little bit too, because I feel that I have said to several clients lately, yes, but you're in the middle of a transition, right? And it sort of has become this conversation of, oh yeah, I knew that, but I'm not paying attention to that. Or I know that, but I'm not giving myself credit for that. Or I know that, but I'm expecting myself to be, in a different place than I actually am. And I think so oftentimes that's what happens in business is we expect ourselves to be doing or receiving or seeing something different than we are, and how we deal with that and what the reality is behind it. It's really important to know what's actually happening. So enough preface. Again, if you're live, say hi. I would love to know that you're here. And I am tracking, it looks like I am tracking the comments. So, okay. So please, if you're live, say hi, but also feel free to ask questions as we go. Feel free to share your experience. Feel free to agree or disagree with me. This is always hopefully a conversation, a back and forth. I'd love to know how this resonates with you. And if you want to share what's happening with your specific business, or what challenges you're having, or what questions you have related to transitions for you, especially if you're live, drop those notes in the comments. And I do create space when I talk about these things. I create space for actual live conversation. So even though we're on Facebook, we can make it happen. And then if you're watching the replay, this is probably something I don't say enough, but don't just comment. If you tag me and you're watching the replay, tag me in your comments, and it will notify me and I'll come back in and respond. So if you have a question and you're watching the replay, you're not SOL. I'm still here and I would love to respond to your question or comment. Okay. All right. So transitions. I want to talk a little bit about maybe what a transition in your business is. So we're just going to start real basic, but again, this is hopefully to expand your awareness around what's actually happening in your business. I think it's really, really important to understand what's going on. A transition or a change in your business can happen at many different levels. It can be something big and it can be something small. So back in my old corporate days, I did a lot of consulting work. I was, if anybody is aware of organization development or change management, that's the work that I used to do. And I basically used to, in different ways and in different roles, support organizations through transitions, through changes. And in big global organizations that I was working in back then, these were typically fairly big changes. So for example, I was part of a project where we took the global finance organization of a global company, and we completely reorganized it. We changed how the structure was from, you know, who reports to who. We created a new org chart. Within that new org chart, we changed how roles were divided up. So just because you were, let's say, like an accountant in North America, now you might be, you know, you might have a slightly different job description with slightly different roles going forward. And then figuring out who goes in those boxes, and do you fire or hire? What do you do with all of that, right? So those are big changes, right? We're going to completely reorg the finance department. Another company I worked for, we made a lot of changes to the team that was responsible for administering compensation for the entire organization. They had to implement a new system because they had disparate systems across the whole company, and they needed to merge that into one. And then when they did that, they realized how differently each like department or region was sort of managing their compensation, and the rules that they used to determine who was going to get paid what. And so what they did is they came together and said, okay, we're going to compensate our people like not equally, but yes, equally, but this in the same way, utilizing the same rules across the entire organization. Okay. Those are examples of really big changes, right? And so often we think that unless we're making some big ass change in our business, we're not actually making a change, or we're not actually in transition. And what I find more often than not, especially with entrepreneurship, with smaller businesses, which a small business is really, I think the threshold right now is like 25 million. So if you're making less than 25 million, you're still considered a small business. Our changes might be smaller, but the way that we go through change is the same. And so what I want to share, so a couple of other examples, right? If you, let's say you're a service provider and you decide that, let's say you have 2 or 3 different primary ways that you serve your clients, 2 or 3 different primary offers. Maybe of those 3, one you're closing out and a new one you're opening up. Right? So maybe you keep 2 of them the same, and maybe you close down one, you don't offer one anymore, and you create a new one. Okay. That's a pretty decent size transition as far as how do you communicate with your clients and your audience around what's changing, right? Do you have existing clients who are utilizing the service that you're retiring? How are you going to support them through that? Do you have a different program for them? Is this I don't do this anymore, thank you so much, let me support you on your way out? That's a transition for them, for your relationship with them. And then what are you going to do? Who's coming into the new service that you're offering? How are you going to get your audience and your pipeline to be aware of this new offer? If they're used to following you all the time, is this something that's sort of like another layer of what you already do, or is it a completely different service, right? See how all the many different things that you have to think about when you think about that type of transition. And then also, what systems are you going to use, right? Is this a new training program? Are you going to put it on Teachable or Kajabi? Is this something you're going to deliver live? Is it going to be evergreen? How are you going to manage as a practitioner in terms of offering something new while you have your existing clients in your other programs, right? All of that to me feels like a pretty big change. You have to transition. You have to create a transition plan. I recommend that you create a transition plan around how you're going to do that, what you're going to do first, second, third. Are you going to flip the switch and just do, whoop, this is gone as of the end of the year and this is up as of next year? Again, what does that mean for your clients who are transitioning out or into a new program? How are you going to support them? How are you going to support how does your schedule change to support you supporting a different group or a different program? And then how are you reaching out to promote the new? All of these things are things to think about. But there are also transitions that I think we don't give enough credit to ourselves for. Such as, let me think of a good example. One of the things I've been talking with a couple of clients around, sorry for the road noise, I have a window open by the front door. One of the things I've been talking to a lot of clients around is they have their, ideal target audience, their ideal client, their client avatar, whatever you want to call that they've been working with for some time. And they're realizing that it's time to make an adjustment. And it's not a complete change. Like, let's say, for example, you're a coach and you support women going through divorce. And that's always been the case, or sorry, that you support people going through divorce. And that you work, oh, that's not a good example. Let me use, okay. Let's say you're a coach and you support women going through divorce. And that's what you've been doing for a while. That's what you're known for. And what you're finding is that let's just say, this is not a good example because I've never been divorced, but I know a lot of people who have, but let's just say that you've identified there are several phases within the divorce process, right? Like okay, am I gonna walk away, or did I get left? There's the separation, there's the, preparing for the legal process, there's going through the legal process, and then what happens after the legal process. Okay, so let's say within that phase or that process, you're realizing that you're like really good, and the people that come to you that you enjoy serving the most, and the part of the work that you think you're the best at and that you love the most is the beginning phase. And perhaps maybe once the legal process starts, or once the legal process is over, maybe there's a point in time where you feel as though that's actually not the part of the work that you love the most, and it's maybe not your sweet spot, and it's maybe the part where you sort of feel like maybe I'm making this up, but maybe they're supported enough by their attorney team that that's not really your specialty, right? Your specialty is more in the shock and the early part of it, okay? So you're still being a divorce coach, right? You're still supporting women. You're still supporting women going through divorce, and you're just tweaking and refining that. Rather than supporting them through the entire process, you're going to help them with, I'm just going to make this up, the first half of the process, okay? That is still a transition. I'm just going to check the notes here to see the notes. Just going to check to see if there's any comments here. If you're live, let me know. That's still a transition. And the reason I want to highlight these seemingly smaller transitions, or these moments of refining things in our business, is because when we don't recognize that we're creating transition, when we don't recognize that we are in the middle of a transition, we oftentimes expect things of ourselves, of our clients, and of our team, and of our results that aren't necessarily fair expectations. And when we are going through a transition and we don't go through a transition with clear intention, and I'm talking right now about changes that you create, right? There's of course changes that happen to you, and we can talk about that too. But in this example, if I'm going through a change in refining who I work with, and I'm just running through that process without setting clear intentions and even putting a plan together around how I want to accomplish that, I'm making it harder on myself. I'm making it harder on my team. I'm making it harder on my audience to figure out what it is that I do. And I'm making it harder on my existing clients, because I do actually have a real choice point around what am I going to do with my clients that are in the second half of this process that I've decided I don't want to support anymore. Am I going to see that through? That's one choice. But that's not the right choice for everyone. Do I need to let them know that things have evolved in my business and I'm going to go, I'm going to stay focused on one phase, and I'm going to help to transition them to whatever support team is right for them in the second phase? How am I going to communicate this in my marketing? Because even though it's not that big of a difference, that is something that I would want to put on my website in terms of who I serve, what I specialize in, where my sweet spot is, right? That's the word I always love to use. Where my genius zone is, tweaking my marketing copy to make sure that it's not describing like the entire process when I talk about it. So that is a transition. And again, going through a transition, big or small, the best thing that you can do is be intentional about it. And I want to also talk about this little process here that you're going through when you go through this when you go through a transition. Oh my God, Laura. The process, again, sometimes is things are happening to you. Sometimes you're creating change, right? In this example that we've been using. Again, sometimes it's big and small. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. But, and I'm talking about putting a plan together. And I think that's really important to do. And I also think it's important when you put a plan together that you're thinking through your change at every level. Do you have systems all the way down to what's going to change in your team? How's your team going to need to change to support this new thing? Does your team need to do something different? Do you have the skills on your existing team to support that next piece that you want to add or do or change? Or does your team need to just follow a new process? All of these things, the more you can do it with intention, the better for everyone. And well, let me hold that thought. So doing it with intention, the other thing I want to talk about when we talk about transition is when you're talking about a plan. Again, this is about you creating your own change. We're going to talk about other types of change in a minute. If you're transitioning and you're creating a plan, one of the things that I think a lot of people underestimate or misestimate is misestimate a word? Mistakenly create for themselves is they think that they need to do this with the flip of a switch. That's what we used to do in consulting is, when is the go live date? When is this change effective? And you're building and planning for something to, let's say you're using a new system. We're going to, start setting up the new system. We're going to start pulling the data out of the old system, but what's the day that we are going to use the new system from now on and not the old, right? The idea that you have to flip a switch is actually not necessary. Depends on the change. Completely depends on the type of change. And it may be that you want to draw a line in the sand and say by the end of the year, and this is the kind of conversation I've been having with a lot of my clients, had another one today. you might want to say by the end of the year, I want X to be changed, right? But you're planning for that with intention, right? There is still some element of like a phased approach or some sort of progression towards that goal while you unravel the old and you start to like put together the new. We a lot of times want to flip the switch because we just want to have it done with. But so often our teams, our clients, ourselves need a transition. We need a transition. We need a thoughtful, intentional plan, and that includes progress towards that goal. And that could be like over the course of 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be complicated. When I worked in corporate, our projects were usually like 1 to 2 years. It doesn't have to be like that. The beauty of working with small businesses is that we can change more rapidly. We don't have to move hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people and systems. And, it's just there's much less to move. You can just move. But even changing a system takes a minute to transition out of the old one and into the new one. Even refining who it is that you serve takes a moment to start adjusting that in your marketing copy, to start talking to people about it differently, to be thinking about, well, what are the key points? How does someone know where they are in that divorce phase, for example? So when it happens, when you create change, and when you create, I recommend, number one, that you create some sort of plan for it that's clear and intentional, that brings everybody along with you. You do have a choice of whether you're going to flip a switch or if it's going to be this progressive process, phased approach, if you will, to your end goal. And that doesn't mean, even if you do a progress, that doesn't mean that you don't have maybe a date by which you want to have it done. And again, it doesn't have to be long, but I do recommend that you take a moment to look across your business as a whole. Client conversation, customers, clients, both the ones that are your existing clients and customers, and also the people that are in your following. How is this going to affect each one of them? How is this going to affect yourself, your schedule, your to-do list? Does something need to come? Is this like a full add-on, or are you removing something and adding something? How is this going to change your schedule? How is this going to change your team? We talked about this a minute ago. Roles and responsibilities for your existing team. Do you have skills that you need in order to move forward that exist on your team, or do you need to go hire out for an additional person or people? Will your existing team's roles change? Does anybody need to add some sort of task to their workload? Great. How are we going to make sure that we have availability, right? Because most people I know have freelancers. Does your team have the availability? Even if they have the skills, do they have the time? And when do they have the time to dedicate to these changes? And how long will it take them to learn what they need to change? All of these things. And then you think about your marketing. Then you think, how is this going to impact me financially? How is this going to impact systems, processes, technology, ways of being, right? All of those things. And again, it doesn't always have to hit every single layer, but it might. It absolutely might affect all of these things. And so thinking that through and understanding holistically, what's the actual impact of the change that I'm making, and then putting your plan together to support all of those pieces. It also helps you, once you sort of look through at all the different pieces of your business, it starts to get really clear, like what needs to happen first, second, and third. If you don't have a single teammate that can help you do this, then obviously you need to start by hiring somebody, right? So, or if your technology doesn't support what you want to put together, that's one of the first things you'll need to make sure that you've added into your plan. So thinking that through, I think, is something that not a lot of people think about. I know that not a lot of people think about. And then hi Tanisha, and then when we move forward into this new space, if we haven't thought it through and we haven't thought about how it's affecting our schedule, our team, our clients in particular, it just creates more work. And I think it creates an expectation of that switch flipping that isn't in most cases a fair expectation. Many, many, many changes in small businesses don't need to be done by the flip of a switch. If you want to change your pricing, and maybe your pricing is on your website, okay, that's pretty flip switchy, right? That's pretty switch flippy. Go into your website, change the number, go into your accounting system and your invoicing systems and change the number. Okay. That's a good example of something you really can flip the switch for. And then assuming that your existing clients, you're not raising prices on your existing clients, then you're set, right? If you're raising prices on your existing clients, then you need to have some sort of transition plan for them, right? So again, thinking through how you change something in your business and who and what it impacts is really important. The other thing I notice is people want to make a whole bunch of changes all at once, right? We're entrepreneurs. What does that mean? We're probably highly creative individuals. We think fast. We have big ideas. We come up with cool, great things, and we want to just implement them and go. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's, I think, one of the coolest things about running a business is you can do that. You can make changes quickly. And I want to like hold that for a minute, because if I'm comparing it to working for a global, Fortune 500 company, yeah, you can make changes a lot quicker, a hell of a lot quicker. But what is quick, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you can or should expect you and your team to make changes over the course of a week necessarily, right? But those of us who are entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship attracts people who have big ideas, who are visionaries. So more often than not, visionaries and not implementers, right? And we have this great idea and we're like, awesome, this is amazing. We're not doing that anymore. We're doing this. And there's nothing wrong with that. And take a breath, take a moment, and put a little plan together. It doesn't have to be a complicated plan. But take a minute and understand how this change is going to impact all the different pieces of your business so that you can make that change as easily as possible. Okay. And the other point I wanted to make around that is, and how many changes do you need to make at once? Right? How many changes do you need to make at once? Oftentimes when we make one change, we want to make another change. The other part of that is our businesses are holistic, right? So when you change one thing, you typically end up on purpose or by accident changing something else, because our businesses, all the components of our business are interrelated with one another. And so it's very, very hard to change one aspect of the business and not impact any other aspect of the business. So looking at it holistically and taking stock of like, what happens when I change this to my systems? What happens when I change this to my financials? What happens when I change this for my team? What happens when I change this for my clients? What happens when I change this for my following, for people who are in my pipeline, who've been thinking about working with me, right? All up to my marketing, blah, 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 blah. I could keep going on. Most of the time, so you have to make a plan that makes sense for you, okay, and for your business and for what's actually happening. And I can't prescribe, and this is one of the things I do with my clients, is we don't do a one-size-fits-all approach to coaching or to running a business, because every body is different and every business is different. But more often than not, when I help my clients through these transitions, we put together a plan that's progressive, that's a phased approach. We do one change, then another. Or we work towards one big change and then another. Or within just the one change that you want to make, we put together a plan that helps you do a little bit every week or every month, depending, to get you, progressively towards that goal without having to have expectations of you, your clients, and your team in particular that aren't fair and that don't support, because we don't want you to like make a change and then half-ass it, right? You want to be able to make a change that's smooth, that feels comfortable, that feels manageable, because any change that we make is a shift in our brain, right? How many times have you like moved to a new home and you have to re-autopilot things in your brain, right? Like you get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and you're like, wait, where's the bathroom? Wait, what side of the bed am I on? I don't, hold on. You have to reorient yourself, right? Or you move to a new house and you go to the grocery store, even if you're in the same town, maybe you're on the other side of the same grocery store. Your autopilot of just hopping in the car and running to the store, it's changed. It's not a huge change for you, but you do have to take a minute and find the best route to the store at different times of day, right? And then you get to that store, if it's a different store, right? Maybe the produce and the milk are reversed than the one store that you used to go to. All of these things, our brains are wired to get into routines, to repeat things, to do the autopilot thing. It's beautiful. And when we change it, it's important to give our brains a minute to get their sea legs and to get adjusted to the way that we've changed it. So even if it's a new system, right, you're going to go in, you're going to click on something and you're going to go into the old system and you're like, oh crap. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I have to go over here to this system and log into this one. So giving your team, yourself, your clients, all of the things, a chance to adjust to the new is a big one of the 75 reasons why you want to have some sort of plan. Okay, let me just check the comments, and then I want to talk a little bit more about just the nature of transition, because again, I find that so oftentimes people aren't giving themselves credit for being in a transition. Hi, Craig. I haven't seen you in a long time. It's great to see you, my dear. Tanisha says, thank you for that reminder. Good analogy. Yeah, I've moved so many times that I know that all the things that moving does to your brain, and it wears you out, not just because you touch every single thing that you own, but because you have to reestablish those patterns of the parts of your life that you just don't even think about. I mean, it happens when you get a new coffee maker, right? Like having to put the new coffee maker to, pressing the buttons in a different way. It's not a big deal. You don't need to make a big transition plan about it, but it is something that takes your brain a minute to get adjusted to. Okay, so now I want to talk about, so that's sort of like, I'm making a change. Those are some things to think about. Are you going to do it all at once? Are you going to do it progressively? How many changes are you making at once? Or are you making, like, for example, a big change, and then underneath that big change, there's maybe 3 or 4 things that need to change underneath that? How do you put that plan together first, second, third? Those are all the things that I like to think about. And then again, thinking holistically about all the aspects of the business that might be impacted. Because here's what I know to be true. Even when, this happens all the time in corporate, but even when you have a small business and you plan your transition out, something's going to be impacted that you don't anticipate, that you couldn't have predicted. And so it's just important to think through what you do know, so that you have as few surprises as possible. And that, again, it's as smooth as possible for you, for your team. Nobody's getting burned out in the process. That's one of the things I used to hate about my old job. Was I loved helping people with change. I loved like supporting those big projects and like watching all these things move and change, and what happens to the people, and how do you look at the psychology of how, big groups of people change. I loved that part of it. But what I didn't love about it was when we got closer and closer and closer to the go live date, what happened? Freaking everybody was working like 10, 12-hour days, weekends, evenings. Everybody was stressed out. Everybody was burnt out. And that's not my recommendation. I don't think that you have to work that way. That's one of the reasons I left corporate, because I just didn't feel like that way of being and way of working was necessary, and certainly wasn't enjoyable for me. And so you can do this in a way that doesn't burn you out, but if you don't think about it in advance, you might wear yourself out. You might wear your team out. Okay, So transition. Transitions, again, I'm going to talk for a moment about big transitions. Okay. So let's say the market changes and you have to pivot your audience. You have to pivot your way of service, right? A lot of people had to make pivots when COVID came to the world, right? They can be really messy. And even though I just sat and talked about all these like, oh, put a plan together, think it through, do it progressively, one, then the other. So oftentimes what happens is transitions are inherently messy. And so I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, and I do that a lot because I just believe that the world is not black and white. There are elements of both planfulness and surprise or messiness or things that feel nonlinear. Transition is all of that. It's why I geek out about it, because I find it so fascinating. There's layers and layers and layers and layers and layers around transitions and change. What happens when people change? What happens when change happens to you? Okay. But they are inherently messy. And I think one of the easiest ways to think about that is to come out of business and think about a personal example. Okay, Tanisha, you're welcome, my dear. Craig says I've moved more in my last 6 years since waking up than any other time. Yep. Okay, so if we think about a personal example for a minute, think about what happens when you end a romantic relationship. Even if you're the one ending it, even if this is what you know is right, even if this is what you want. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the phases of a transition. My favorite author around transitions, he talks about it from the perspective of workplace and in personal lives. His name is William Bridges. I think he's passed on now. But he has a very beautiful, very simple, easy to read book called Transitions. And I've recommended this book. I read this book for the first time back in like 2004, 2005. And I've read it many, many times in my life during my own transitions. And I've recommended it to almost every single client, almost every single friend of mine, right? Because who hasn't gone through a transition in their life or in their work? He talks about the 3 phases of a transition, and it begins with the ending. The first thing that happens in a transition is you end the old. You have endings, right? So in this relationship example, you're thinking through what you're going to do. You make the decision to end the relationship. You hopefully sit down and have the conversation with the person that you're ending the relationship. Then you go into, and this is not linear, by the way, or it is linear in the sense that you go from one to the other, but you may go back and forth. It's sort of like the cycles of grief, where it might be that you're in 1 or 2 phases at a time, or that you go forward and then you go back. So it's not linear in that sense. So you have the neutral zone, which I just love the name of that, because that's like confusing. That's where the transitions are inherently messy comes from. Like, you sometimes don't know which way is up. You're wait a minute, I came up with this. This was my idea to end this relationship, but now I'm sad and I missed this part of our relationship. And now, like, now I have to go to now I'll use the grocery store. Now I have to go to the grocery store because my partner used to go to the grocery store for us. And now I have to figure out, how to adjust to cooking for one person and whatever, right? The neutral zone is that confusing space where you're neither in the old nor in the new. You're not in a new relationship, or you're not in a new space where you're like comfortable and you've got your sea legs for being single. You're in the middle. You're in the neutral zone. And I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful word to describe it, because it can be very confusing. That's where it all feels very messy. And he talks even about like positive changes in your life can still feel messy and can still put you in the neutral zone. All transitions go through this, whether it's work and, if you're just changing your pricing, and it's not a mindset issue for you, yeah, maybe you fly through those 3 phases pretty quickly. But everything goes through this, even change, whether change happens to you or whether you create change. So they talk about, like, even if you, like, when I moved to this, I live on an island off the coast of Honduras. And when I moved here, it was absolutely something I chose. I wanted to live here. I wanted to be able to scuba dive when I wasn't working. I wanted to move to a warmer climate. I wanted to live in a place where people lived slower and where I could slow down and where I could, enjoy life more and whatever. And yet when I moved here, this is absolutely what I wanted to do. I created this change for myself, but you better believe moving to another country put me in the neutral zone. I didn't know how to go to the grocery store. I still don't have a car. I had to figure out how to get to the grocery store. What kinds of foods can I eat? I have food allergies. What can I eat? What can I not eat? How am I going to get what I need here? All of those things put you in the neutral zone. You have to adjust to a new culture, right? This happens with the good transitions and bad transitions. And then after the neutral zone, you move into the new beginnings, right? So that's when, like in my moving example, that's when I sort of started to settle in and plant some roots and make some friends and have a little autopilot at the grocery store and whatever. If you're, coming out of the neutral zone after a breakup, maybe that's when you, like I said, adjust to being single, or you enter into a new relationship or whatever that new way of being is. In business, right, you can see very clearly the end, the middle, and the new. But what I find is really important is that neutral zone. And this is where a lot of clients tell me, like, but I don't understand why I haven't made this shift, why I haven't received the results that I'm expecting from this change that I made. Because baby, you're still in the neutral zone. You've wrapped up the old, but you're not all the way in the new, and you're still sort of serving a few clients in the old way and opening up space for the new clients, and you're still in the neutral zone. And you have to give that neutral zone a chance, because that's when you don't acknowledge that you're there, and when you don't deal with all of the aspects of it, you can move into the new, but then you can also keep moving back into the neutral zone. And that's not to make it bad, it's just the nature of change. But I love his model because it's exactly what happens, right? And again, it's not A+1, 2 + 2 + 3, but it is a process that we all go through, and understanding, oh, this feels really messy, or like, I've got all this, but why is this not working? Because that aspect of your business is still in the neutral zone. You've got aspects in, that's what happens a lot of times when we make changes, particularly like medium to large size changes in our business, is we will have like one aspect of our business in the old, one in the new, and some in the neutral zone, and everything's sort of like slowly moving in that direction. But it takes a minute, and it's not linear, and it's not always clean, even though you can have a plan. So knowing that you're in transition, particularly knowing you're in the neutral zone, I find is one of the most important awareness moments that you can have, because we expect ourselves to be the person in the future that's like, okay, if you're a business owner and you're in the and you're in the new, and you've done that for a while, you kind of know what's going on there. You've made some clear decisions. You have new processes and systems and things in place that support that new space. But if you're still not there yet, if you're just entering the new, we like to expect ourselves as business owners to have everything figured out, to know everything, to know how it's supposed to be, and to act like we've been in this new place for 2 years, and to have the knowledge and the learning curve of the me that's going to be in 2 years from now. But that's actually not where we are. We're right here, and we're still sort of navigating neutral zone and new at the same time. And so really getting compassionate and caring about yourself around where you are in the process can be really helpful, where you can stop being so hard on yourself, because the harder you are on yourself, pretty much with anything in business, the harder it is to get the results you want, the harder it is to enjoy your work, because it's just not necessary to be hard on yourself, but we all do it. It's just the nature of being human. But when you expect yourself to be at the end of the new and you are actually in the neutral zone, can you see how that's going to throw you off? So paying attention to the expectations you have, same with your team, right? Never underestimate a team's learning curve to make a change. Human behavior, even if somebody is really, really quick and good at what they do, making a change to something that they've always been doing a certain way, it's actually a thing. I mean, that's why I used to have a job. Human behavior, the human mind takes a minute with change, right? And so even on a teeny tiny micro level, if you're asking a team member to use one system versus another, and it mostly does the same thing, and just a few nuances are really changed, it's still going to take them a minute to adjust to the new. And so with the more compassion and flexibility you can have with your expectations of your team, in addition to you, the easier your transition will be. And when you plan out your transition, you can give your team some time and cushion to get up to speed and adjust it. Don't just expect people to flip a switch. Expectations come in, we think it's supposed to be linear. Well, I did this and I moved into this, so why is everything not just perfect? Because just because you're in the new doesn't mean that you're not like still figuring out systems and processes. Just because you're in the new doesn't mean that, you know, look, I say this a lot. When you make changes in business, or when you reach a new income level, or when you do anything next level in your business, you're moving into the new. You're moving into a space where what you're doing now is not something you've ever done before. Even if it's just a tweak, even if it's just a mild adjustment, a small adjustment to what you used to do, you're still doing something you've never done before, or something you've never done before exactly like this. And so we don't always give ourselves a minute to breathe and to give ourselves credit for you're in a new space, right? Have you ever started a new job and you realize like the first 3 days, how much you don't know? And then 3 weeks later, you're like, oh, I still don't know all these things. I didn't even know all the things that I don't know, right? Because it takes a minute to move into a new space. And there's a learning curve, right? Sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a year, but there is a learning curve, and giving yourself that opportunity as a business owner to go, I'm in a transition. So I'm learning how to be the business owner in this new space. I'm learning how to be my next level business owner. And this is what a lot of what I help my clients with is like, okay, so who am I now in this new way? Who am I now that I'm making my, that I've made my income goals? Who am I now that I'm serving a different type of client? Who am I now that I'm successful by my own definition? How do I adjust as a business owner? What type of business owner am I? How do I keep that going? So time, whether it's linear, whether you're expecting yourself to have to feel in control, or whether you're expecting results to come, if you're changing who you serve and you're like, where are those brand new clients? I told everybody this is who I work with now. Why are they not here, right? You have to give it a minute to transition. Your audience has to transition too. So take a minute with that. I keep saying a minute, but it's more than a minute, right? Take some space for yourself, for your team, for your every aspect of your business to adjust into the new. And when you do, you will find it's just so much easier, and that you also plan for it. Let's see. Craig says, I have to go, but thank you for your knowledge, Laura. Your knowledge is very healing for many people. Thank you. Thank you, Craig. It's lovely to see you. I appreciate your words. So I think the majority of what I wanted to cover, I have. If you are watching the replay and you have any questions or comments, or if you have a transition that you're going through in your business and you want to ask me something, please pop a note here in the comments. Transition is, I think, the nature of running a business. And in some ways, we're always in transition, but in other ways, that's part of what I have found to be one of the keys to running a successful business, or one of the keys to enjoying running your business, is to make your changes sustainable, to run your business in a way that's sustainable for you, given your personality, given how much you want to work, given your work style, given your work preferences. And it's also why I coach a lot of my clients to make one change at a time, so that they can build on their learning curve, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and give your business a chance to see results from the changes that you make. I believe in managing change sustainably. And that's one of the reasons I left corporate, because it didn't feel sustainable to me, or I wasn't able to make as great of an impact as I wanted to make from a sustainability perspective. And then I burned out in the process. And that's oftentimes the type of people that I work with. So if you are looking to create more sustainability, less burnout, more intentionality in yourself as you run your business, I would love, love, love to talk to you. I still have a couple slots left for coaching in the new year, starting in January. And if you're interested, I will pop the link here in the comments. Just hop on a free call with me. I'm really, really big on fit. So it's important to me that we have a conversation about what's going on in your business, and see if what I do is a good match for you. And if so, great. We'll get started in January. I have a special right now. If you sign by the end of the year, you will get $500 off, at least until I fill those slots for January. So if you are looking for coaching next year and you want to save some money, hop on a call with me, and we'll get things squared away for the new year. I do believe in sustainable change. And I think that transition is just the nature of life and the nature of business, and that the more comfortable we can get with how we manage change, the more comfortable we can get with how we want to affect change in our organization, the easier it is to be the CEO of your business, the easier it is to be a business owner. Being a business owner is not easy. And it doesn't have to be as hard as a lot of people make it. And it doesn't have to be as hard as we all want to make it. I do the same thing. I have my own coach, because we're humans. And so we have to take the human factor in when we're doing things in our business. But I think that one of the things that's really important to me is that if you're going to be changing over the years, let it be sustainable. Let yourself build something that continues to work for you, that you don't have to work for. There is just a big difference. So anyway, have a lovely, lovely week. I hope you're doing well. I'll be back with another topic next week. I think I'm talking about team next week. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks so much. Have a good week. Bye.